Okay, so welcome back to the second video this week on the Vietnam War on the Explaining History YouTube channel. So one of the little known aspects of the Vietnam War is that Britain in 1945 had a clear involvement. The first division of Vietnam following the defeat of Japan was carried out by the nationalist Chinese forces, Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang Chinese forces in the north, and the British in the south. The southern part of Vietnam was referred to colonially as Cochin China, and it was here that the British Army arrived. So what were the British doing in Vietnam? Well, in Vietnam, which was next door to Britain's other Asian colonies, Malaya on one side and Burma on the other, and Malaya to the south really, and Burma to the east. There were obviously, as we've already discussed, powerful nationalist forces emerging. The British, from 1942 to 43 onwards, had given serious thought about this. They didn't really know very much about Vietnam and hadn't had a great deal of interest in it, so they didn't want it for themselves. But they thought, if we're going to re-establish the British Empire here in Asia, after this humiliation from the Japanese, having been kicked out of Malaya, kicked out of Singapore, chased out of Burma, we're going to have to do it and create a kind of a safe neighbourhood for the British Empire. And the thing that's sweeping across Asia, from India all the way through to the Philippines and Indonesia, is nationalism. And we are going to be beset after the war by these, pesky nationalist forces that are going to tear the empire apart. So we don't want that. So what we definitely don't want is, if we've controlled our empire, got our empire back, having the French, who the British always look on as being fundamentally unreliable and unable to do anything properly, them having their empire beset by nationalism, because those nationalists who managed to chase the French out will inspire Malay nationalists and Singaporese and Burmese and all the rest to kick the British out of their colonies, and worse even, perhaps even India. So this was the worry. So the British Army returned in August 1945 and, in inverted commas, liberated South Vietnam from the Japanese. The Japanese surrendered in an orderly fashion, as instructed to by their emperor, and the Japanese also cooperate with the British. The British rearm them, they use them to put down the Viet Minh, and they use the Japanese as a kind of a garrison force. The Japanese, some of the Japanese also kind of go native and decide that they are going to join with the Viet Minh, stick around and cause the victorious Europeans as much trouble as possible, which they indeed do. In August 1945, the Viet Minh temporarily take control before the British can really reassert themselves. The Viet Minh take control and create a sort of a provisional government without the permission of Britain or France. The British, when they seize power and establish a military government, an emergency government, they then free the French colonialists and the former Vichy regimists from the prisons that the Japanese had put them in. And so these French colonists returned to their freedom in Vietnam, and they've been humiliated several times over. Firstly, they feel that they've been humiliated by the Japanese. They also know that their homeland in France has been overrun by the Germans, and they feel humiliated there. And so they think to themselves, they are damned if they are going to be humiliated again by the Viet Minh, the new Vietnamese nationalists. And they also, in their own particularly racist style, object to the fact that the British soldiers, or the British forces who liberate them, are normally Indian soldiers. And so they feel at the bottom of the heap, and having to rely on the British, if you're a patriotic Frenchman, to help you out is, a real bitter pill to swallow, particularly if it is one of Britain's Asian soldiers. So bigotry does exist, what can I say? So there you have it. The moral of this story is that by 1945, the manner in which the British had administered Vietnam for a few months meant that you had the big seeds of a civil war. You had, or at least a colonial war. You had French colonists coming out of jail, desperate to retain control, and you had Vietnamese nationalists who are now armed, ready to fight for their country, and the British withdraw and leave the French to their devices, and civil war or colonial war, whichever you want to put it, breaks out in due course. Thanks.